Hello, my name is Parker,
And my name is Ned.
and this is The Force Unlimited, yet another Star Wars Unlimited podcast. This is episode number 6, and we're recording on January 7th. 2 items of business before we get to the meat and potatoes. The first, when Ned and I started talking about doing a podcast, and I started thinking about branding, fun fact, the original name for SWODB was actually theforceunlimited.com. That was the first Star Wars Unlimited domain name that I reserved. And so that obviously felt like an easy layup for the podcast name, but I wanted to have a hashtag. I'm not normally a hashtag kind of person. On Mastodon I am, but not in most places. But I want to have a hashtag because I kind of wanted to call out podcast related posts as opposed to traditionally SWODB related posts. And The Force Unlimited was too long, and FU it's already Twitter, right? Like that feels caustic. So I ended up going with YASWHIP, hashtag YASWHIP, yet another Star Wars Unlimited podcast, just because I felt like we were already jumping into a crowded pool, and it feels very appropriate. I feel really glad that we've subtitled our podcast Yet Another, because I feel like so many people are making content for this game.
Oh yeah.
Hopeful that's I tweeted this, but I'm hopeful that that's a sign of a lot of people being excited about the game, and it's just some ratio. I'm nervous that that's a sign of just 2024, right? That I saw a comment once that, men over 30 will leap at the chance to just talk unedited about their hobby for 2 hours rather than go to therapy, and that feels like on point, But there's so many that have been jumping out, and I want to give a quick acknowledgement to one that's coming tomorrow. Tomorrow for us, dear listener, there will probably be 2 episodes of a new podcast, Outmaneuvered. I believe they are releasing their first episode tomorrow morning for us, and about a week ago for you. And I want to talk about Outmaneuvered, having not listened to anything, so I hope it's not terrible, because that will be egg on my face. But I wanted to acknowledge Outmaneuvered because one of the 4 co-hosts, they all are known, I think, for spicy takes, and I'm excited to hear what they have to say. But his dudeness is one of the creator of, the maintainer of one of the 2 tabletop simulator mods for Star Wars Unlimited. And I think it's important to acknowledge that, because content creators who are also resource creators, I think, are a special breed, and I want to give a shout out to another one. I'm not saying that making SWODB and The Force Unlimited makes me a better person. Going to law school is what made me a better person, but the but it should be acknowledged that there's anytime I think there's another resource creator who also steps up as a content creator. I'm not saying that his dudeness belongs to a privileged gentry whose voice should be deferred to and listened to and acknowledged with greater weight amongst the community. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that the air we breathe is more rarefied and dignified than common content creators. And so Outmaneuvered, wherever fine podcasts are sold, from somebody who's also, I think, been doing great work in the community. And I just feel like it's already enough work to make something, so to make 2 things merits acknowledgement.
All I'm going to say is that the air that I breathe, I think, is about 25% recycled Taco Bell at any particular moment in time. So I'm not going to make any claims about the particular nature of air.
I think that's why we don't record in the same space. So on that note, I want to give Jake from Holocron, somebody get him from Swoo Holocron, somebody get him a podcast. Not ours, because
I was gonna say, like, you could invite him on. Like, I'm not
as a
proud.
guest, yes.
Okay.
I'm saying, I mean, I have a lot of personal investment in being the data guy on behalf of our show, and Swoo Holocron is all the data. I mean, and it dwarfs anything I've done, and it's all meticulously hand entered. So to the extent that the gold standard, I think, for a resource creator who is
data.
also, I mean, it's all the data. It's 1,000 SWU he calls them transmissions, posts,
Sure.
YouTube's podcasts, 1,000 of them, each at least tagged. I'm sure there's a system, but at least tagged by hand. So that's commitment, and somebody get that man a podcast. Second order of business, with all these podcasts, Ned, you and I are building, carving out a specific niche, a specific brand, the McNeil Layer, right? We're going for dry but deep and novel. So I'm hoping that tonight we are talking about something that is new and fresh to the Star Wars Unlimited. We're not going to talk about draft. We got to talk about something new.
I mean, it's new to the extent that Taco Bell lettuce is new, to refer to prior comments.
That bodes ill. So you're saying we're going to talk about something?
I think it'll be a deep dive into something that I think has been well trod, though.
Okay, so new to us. All right. This is going to be
yes.
NBC. If you haven't seen it, it's new to you. We haven't talked about it, so it's new to us. Okay, I can work with that. But first, let's talk about the match. And it's a single-digit episode number 6. Yeah. So I'm going to keep explaining our bits until they've been around. Yeah. At the top of every episode, Ned and I, before we record, we play one game. We'll play more games in between episodes, but one game just to warm up right now, get our head in the spot, and then we don't record it. We don't do actual plays, but we takeaways. Every game should teach you something. If it's a good game, we're recording because we think it's a good game. Ned, tell us about the match we just played. Before I begin, actually, this is the first for Force Unlimited. We played 2 games because I tanked so hard off the first one. That was terrible. So we actually played a second game so we could get some actual takeaways. But Ned, tell us about the matches.
So it was I think this is going to fit the theme of our episode. It was a double match where you were playing Luke Blue and I was playing Hera Green. And so we both were taking advantage of the, relatively recently spoiled sets of double influence cards that are, I think, pretty good. So the first match was an absolute stomp by Hera. I just mid-ranged all over everything, and you didn't get set up. Second game, I think that my mistake was in role assignment. To echo back to the who's the beatdown. In the first game, I felt like I was both the beatdown and the control, which is never a good sign. But realistically, you are the control in this scenario, and so I should have been, rather than ramping on 3, I should have been playing units on 3. And I had a tough decision whether I wanted to ramp or not. And I ramped, but I just never saw the dividends from that resource advantage until it was too late.
I mean, I was playing just vanilla 30 hit point base, and I still managed. You got me to 28, I think.
Yes.
And I still, on the second game where I won, the first game I just got blown out of the water. Staring down all of the Spectres with, or most of the Spectres with no Jedi. 3 Spectres, no Jedi was a rough scene. But the second one, I really, that was what I wanted to see. I was not thrilled with Vigilance, the 2 blue aspect card. I wasn't thrilled about it going in, but mill for 6 is just such a weak, unsatisfying of the 4 pips. I think of all 16 pips we've seen on the named aspect cards.
Sure.
Mill for 6. Maybe in limited, but then it's a legendary.
I think that there are a lot of them that have a weaker mode than the others. And I think that that's generally true for modal effects. And, I feel like we're jumping into future episodes here, but with modal effects, you can have things that are a lot more situational. And I think that 2 of the modes on Vigilance are quite situational, is that the gain base health and the mill are both relatively situational. You're mostly playing it for the other effects. And I think that, Command is the one that I can remember off the top of my head because I just played it. But for the recovery unit and the experience or the deal damage feel like the good modes on that. The experience tokens are fine. And then the, the treated as a resupply is, it's a bad resupply.
It's a bad resupply, but it's a bad resupply that does something else. It's a good one card something else, right? 4 is a question of whether you want to resupply. I think my problem with Vigilance is that everything else is situational, but when applicable, does something.
Right.
And while that could technically be said for Mill 6,
Yeah.
based on the cards we've seen so far, it essentially never actually does anything. I mean, even
Yeah.
if you're going hard on Mill, maybe, but if you're not, if you're just a normal double blue, the
So
likelihood that you're going
here
to be in a situation where Mill 6 matters feels.
So here is where I feel like maybe we're going to run long on this particular little segment, but it is weird that it is in vigilance given that we see the recursion in command. And the reason for that is that the best use of mill is not as an offensive weapon, but as a self mill tool to turn on your recursion effects.
Sure.
And having as like a double blue effect means that you can't really use it with command, or at least you can't easily use it with command, and so you can't get the full value out of that self mill. Like 6 cards of self mill, if you can play a substantial amount of stuff out of your discard pile. And we haven't seen a lot to do that yet. Like Home One and the Snow Speeder
Are not
they're fine,
out
but
of
they're
aspect
not
and not,
exciting. Yeah,
and they're out of aspect double with. Yeah,
yeah,
eh, I was never thrilled to see that card in
yeah.
hand. I think of the double cost cards, that's maybe the one that's least worth going double blue on. But we
Sure.
expect to see at least one, if not
Yeah.
two, double blue cards. So yeah. Otherwise, I just love Jedi. I don't think I love heroism as much as I used to, but the the, the blue Jedi are all my play style. And
I mean, yeah, no. Once you got them out and you got that shield engine going, like it was real rough for me.
Stackable
Um,
Shields was
yeah,
nice. That was real
yeah,
nice. All right. Today, Ned,
yes,
we are going to be talking about card draw, and specifically
yes,
a little bit of backstory. We're going to be talking about variations on card draw, but we're specifically going to be
hmm
talking about Star Wars Unlimited's draw 2 at the end of the round, as opposed to a
yes,
lot of games draw 1.
yes,
Now, you are the one who pitched this topic out of our
yeah.
list of potential topics. Why? What's fascinating to you about this topic?
Well, I think that it does three things that are really good. So, you know, to talk about some of them, we're going to have to do a little bit of math. But I think that one of the things that it does really well is that you draw at the
No, no,
end
no,
of the
not why
round.
you want to talk about draw 2,
Oh,
because
yes,
we'll get to draw 2.
sure,
Why?
sure.
Why do you want to talk about how different games treat drawing? I think in the abstract.
Oh, yeah. So for that, drawing is the most fundamental thing that you do in a card game. Where when you're playing a card game, the cards that you have in your hand are the set of things that you can do, right? Like that. There are exceptions to this. There are games where that you have like both card and then non-card actions, but in
Or
general,
cards start in play, or
sure.
something like that. Sure.
Right. In general, the cards that you have in your hand are the set of options that you have. And in some games, a lot of traditional games, you start with all the cards that you have. So if you think of something like spades or hearts or a lot of other trick takers, you know all of your options at the start of the game because you've looked at all the cards that you're going to have, and then it's about navigating through. But I think that a lot of CCGs don't do that for the reason that if you want a reasonable amount of information, cards do a really good job of parceling out information. Each card has its own little self contained rules text, and given that cards are kind of your options in most card games, the larger the number of cards that you're having to look at one time, the larger the game tree that you're having to consider at one time. And to go back to that complexity idea, I couldn't imagine playing with more than like a 12 card or 13 card hand and having it be like meaningful if that's all the cards that I'm playing. And even then, the cards would need to be really simple.
It's funny that you mentioned that. I hadn't
Yeah.
even considered the idea of starting with all your cards, but I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, that's a thing. And
Sure.
you were mentioning trick takers. You and I have started
Yeah.
playing Cole Worley's Arcs, which is a
Yes.
trick taking game, and
Yeah.
I immediately just flash back to when we started playing that and the differing decision tree, knowing that I have to wrap it all up. I have to get to where I want to go using these cards. There's no top
Yes.
decking. There's no hope.
Nope.
There's nothing else that's coming to save me. I have to do what I want
Yeah.
to do with the cards that are available, the options that are available to me right now.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
that's, I mean, but we're talking about card draw. And
Right.
I don't think there's a TCG out there or LCG that doesn't have some form of card draw. So we can kind of rule out
Yeah.
trick taking. I mean, it's too far removed from our topic,
Sure.
but that's
No,
an
absolutely.
excellent point. Okay, so
But to
you and
your
I have
point
played a
that you
variety
brought,
of what? Say again?
yeah, to your point though about arcs, when you are looking at that hand of cards, that's all of your options. You don't have that hope. But when you're drawing cards, and I think that that's one of the big reasons why a lot of CCGs do have card draw as a big mechanic, other than the reasons that I mentioned before, is that each new card is a new chance to see something. It's exciting to draw cards.
Yeah, you got to sell a lot of cards if you're going to
Yeah.
make a deck of 50, but 50 is too big a
Yes.
hand.
Right.
So, okay, so we're going to talk about hope, and
Yeah.
and you and I have played at this point in our lives a fair variety together. I mean, you and I both
Yes.
played. I started playing. My second ever TCG was SimCity, and I might be one of 3 people in the world who enjoyed that game. But you and I both individually played a fair variety of TCGs, CCGs, LCGs. But together, we've also, I think, we've got a respectable number as a pair for people who do not make any sort of living or content previously about card games. But so let's talk about how, in my mind, thinking the quick, easy options. We've got Marvel Champions is the most recent game I was collecting. I might be done, partially just due to Star Wars Unlimited.
Sure.
Also, I think I have more content than I'm ever going. I mean, I have everything in Marvel Champions so far, but I might be done. But that does
I
full
definitely
hand
hit
refill.
that point. Yeah, I
You
definitely
hit that point way
with the
before
Lord-
me.
With the Lord of the Rings LCG.
Oh, with the
Like,
Lord of the Rings,
yeah,
where you're just like, I'm just
Yeah.
never the combinations. There's too many permutations. I'm never going to hit them. I might be suckered back in if it's the Fantastic Four or something, but I'm probably going to turn that money to Swoo.
Yeah.
But they do. Marvel Champions says full hand refill.
Yes.
You've got the kind of classic one card per turn, which is
Yeah.
80%, 70% of card game. That's the
Yep.
default that you have to make an
Yeah.
argument against. And then we've got Swoo, maybe other games. I'm not actually familiar with any other games that have 2 cards per turn, but Swoo has 2.
Yes. The
and I
Final Fantasy
propose-
TCG
What?
has
Say again?
the Final Fantasy TCG has 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
Your recent discussion on another podcast about the Final
Yes.
Fantasy TCG
Yeah.
pod. Man, I
Pod
don't-
Return to the Waking Sands.
I was like Waking Sands. There's
Yeah.
a word between Pod Waking Sands. Pod Return to the Waking Sands. Your recent conversation there. So you're going to be prepared to
Yeah.
talk about that. I'm not.
Yes.
So we now are at least have 2 games that have draw 2.
Yeah.
I propose we do that in that order, starting furthest
Yep.
away from Star Wars Unlimited and dialing in. So let's talk about a hand refill. The
Yes.
only TCG deck building, constructed deck
Yes.
card game.
Yes. Yes.
The only constructed deck card game that I'm familiar with that has full hand refill
yeah.
is Marvel Champions. So, how do you feel about it? We've played a fair number of games of Marvel Champions.
We have played a fair number of games of Marvel Champions. There we go. There was an old Lord of the Rings card game by Iron Crown Enterprises that also had a hand refill mechanic, and then the Decipher Lord of the Rings card game. Also, I happen to have played a lot of Lord of the Rings card games in my time. Also had a hand refill mechanic.
Wait, the Decipher Lord of the Rings card game.
The Decipher Lord of the Rings card game had a hand refill mechanic. Yes.
Wow, I didn't know they
It
made
was
it.
released after the Peter Jackson movies, and it was basically I think the shortest summary I can give is you were trying to get through the movies as quickly as possible. Like that was the game, was you were trying to get through 2 hours of movie in as rapid a speed as you can.
I want to retain our fans, so I'm not going to say anything negative about Decipher card games, but that sounds.
I've played a lot of
awful.
Decipher card games, so
Yeah,
you're gonna hear some references. But
Yeah, no, that's fair. Sure.
yeah.
Okay, so let's talk. Okay, so it's
Yeah.
been done, but
been done.
and it's not like a. There are mechanics. I think it's fair to say
Yes.
there are mechanics in Decipher card games that
are not bad.
often revisited. Oh no, that are that are bad. That are not often revisited.
Yes.
But yet Marvel Champions
Hmm.
Fantasy Flight's most recent foray into card games.
Yeah.
So it's still a valid mechanic, right? Like
Yes.
still built from the ground up in modern game design. Just
Yeah.
draw back up to some number.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that it has a lot of things going for it. Is that it's really easy to dismiss as this kind of like brain dead, just draw a bunch of cards every turn. But like, it's also fun to do brain dead, draw a bunch of cards every turn. You know,
Yep.
um, if you're not having to think about like your turn over turn resource allocations, it really encourages you to just do stuff, right? Like, you don't have to think what's the best time for me to play my kill card. Now you should play it now. If you have the
Right.
resources, just do it. You
Right.
know, what's
Okay.
the best? Yeah.
But
So
so the
yeah,
thing I like about Marvel Champions, and I'm wondering, do you feel that hand refills is feasible in a competitive game? Because there's a lot of cool mechanics in co-op games that kind of fall apart.
yes,
Um, I like it, but
it's
you
real
know
dangerous.
you're going
Yeah,
through your deck. You're
very
racing in
fast. Yeah,
very fast in Marvel Champions. You're racing
yeah,
through 2 or 3 times is not uncommon,
yeah,
and so that just feels like if you're trying to you're trying to assemble something, but you're just being ground down,
yeah.
whereas in a competitive game the other person's also assembling as opposed to grinding, can't scale infinitely. So
Yeah, so I mean, it's weird in competitive games is that it makes low value card like cheap low value cards suddenly become amazing, right? Because if you've got like a one cost or a two cost card, it always replaces itself depending on
right,
like the amount of the
if
resources.
everything cantrips suddenly,
Right.
just
Suddenly,
vomit,
like
vomit, vomit.
just go,
Yeah,
man. And that tends to make the games weird, where you see a lot of like low value cheap stuff or like throwing away. You know, if you have throwaway to do stuff mechanics, like Marvel Champions, I think is a good example. Is that you want to use up as much of your hand as you can every turn. So, and because cards in your hand are your resource, that's fine. That's reasonable. Um, it makes games tend to your point about like you're going through your deck really fast. You are going through your deck really fast, and so you are very likely to see most of your deck every game. And because you are seeing most of your deck every game, the variance that you have tends to both go down and up. And what I mean by that is you you can use think of variance in two contexts, right? So in one context, it's um, what is your likelihood of seeing any particular card in your deck? If you go through your entire deck, the odds of you seeing a particular card in your deck are one, right?
right,
Like you caveat caveat, you know, like mill or whatever.
right.
Sure.
Sure.
Weird stuff to the side.
Ultron
But
takes one of your cards off your deck, turns it into a drone, but
yeah,
but
yeah,
as a
exactly.
general rule,
You're
you're seeing everything, and especially if you've got three ofs, you're going to find it.
right. But at the same time, if you have a resource gaining mechanism, and by that I mean a lot of card games have a system where you start off small and then over the course of the game you get bigger and bigger and bigger, because of the risk of cards getting stuck in your hand. If you draw the wrong half of your deck, so let's imagine that like on turn one you can play a one cost card, on turn two you can play a two cost card or two one cost cards, etc. If you have an 8 cost card in your deck and you draw it on an early turn of the game,
Oh,
it's
then it
stuck
just
there.
sits there because you can't
It
play
just
it.
sits there. Right.
Okay,
And so the downside of drawing the wrong half of your deck at the wrong time becomes huge because it's taking the space of other cards. And so to go back to like cheap card vomit, you want everything to be playable. And that also means that situational cards suddenly become really terrible, right? Like if
yeah,
there's a card that is useful in a particular situation, every turn that you are not playing it because that situation has not happened, you are losing a card.
right.
So,
Wow.
um,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah,
That does sound
uh,
terrible. I
yeah, I'm not
One thing I
a
like
big
about
fan
it
of it. Yes.
is it allows for variable card draw,
Yeah.
which is something that you don't see. Like in Marvel Champions, you have
Hmm.
each hero defines their hand size. So when you're drawing
Yes.
back up to your hand size, some draw to 4, some draw to 6, and you normally, in most games, if you draw one, I get to draw one. If you get to draw two, I get to draw two. There's this
Hmm.
the symmetry not true in Marvel Champions, and I don't know if other games have explored that, but
Not Not that I have seen, but I think also to the point to Marvel Champions, heroes that have a smaller hand size are they struggle, right? Like think about Hulk, think
Yep.
about, other heroes that have small hand sizes. When you're playing a cooperative game, it's fine to play on hard mode. When you're playing competitively, um,
It's a race to
that's
easy mode. So
substantially less true.
okay,
Um,
okay.
so I
I
overall just not a big fan of it as a mechanic. I think it can work for certain kinds of games, but it feels really kind of chaos mode, which I don't like.
yeah, I mean, I'll agree that I find it diminishes planning. Right? There
Yeah.
because you're not trying to hold on to anything. It's just do what you
Yep.
can this turn, and we'll see what I can do next turn. And
Yep.
you don't get that. There is a perverse delight in that I think I rate higher than maybe many people, but I
Yeah.
know I'm not alone. Of I have this card, and you're going to be mad and or sad, ideally some combination of both, and setting that trap right,
Hmm.
and watching your opponent blunder into it, watching your opponent head to it, knowing that in two
Yes.
turns you are going to suffer, in one turn you are going to suffer. All right, I just need
Yeah.
you to take two actions, and then I'm going to play the Avenger, and you're going to be sad and or mad,
Hmm.
and I'm going to be happy. Like that's a great
Yeah.
feeling, that build, and
Yes.
you don't get that build when you're
No.
just trying to vomit every turn,
Yeah.
and so you lose that. Okay, I don't know that I've ever been a huge fan uh, of refill your hand mechanics, but I'm
Sure.
now able to articulate some that. Okay, I feel like I'm able to articulate. Um,
Hmm.
what you clearly have thoughts about this. So what other is there anything else we can talk about with? Because I just am now realizing I don't like it and I don't want to talk about it, but we should talk about it because we should fill some time. So
Yes. Well, I think that to the point about like draw and discard, it becomes very weird. So draw and discard effects are a big mainstay in a lot of card games, and because your cards have limited value, draw suddenly becomes very strange, right? Like
like
if
it's
I'm
useful
drawing,
if you can draw right now cheaply, but
right,
otherwise it's moot.
right, exactly. Because okay, well, I'm drawing cards. I would have drawn them anyway, and maybe they're fine. But if they're just sitting in my hand, that doesn't really do anything. And similarly with discard, you know, if all of your cards are approximately low value, like throw them out there. And again, different games you're going to handle this in different ways. But in games where where cards have value because you're not filling up your hand every turn. If I hit you with the discard effect, then that feels really bad, or it feels really good for me who hit you with that discard effect, and it's kind of meaningful. Um, all I'm doing with a discard effect, if I'm doing like a one for one or some kind of a discard effect with that, I'm just kind of slowing down the pace of the game a little bit
Right, right,
in a way
exactly.
that
Okay, fine. I
doesn't.
don't get to do this turn,
Yeah.
but I'll have a full hand next turn.
Okay.
Did
Yeah.
either of the Lord of the Ring games?
Yes.
So Marvel Champions also uses cards as resources.
Mm-hmm.
Did either of the Lord of the Rings games do something with that, or was every card of? Was there a way you? I mean, you can't really play every
Sure.
card in a Marvel Champions hand
So
because
yeah.
some of them.
So that Lord of the Rings games, both of them had that kind of a thing where you couldn't play every card. So in both of those games, you had shadow cards that were like you play them against your opponents that were Sauron affiliated cards, and then you had cards that supported you. And talking about the old Lord of the Rings game, um, for that there wasn't any resource. You just sort of played either cards you could just play them, and they didn't cost any resources. And those were things like characters and events. There was no like resource mechanic for that. But for permanent things that got you to winning the game, you had to overcome challenges to do them. So like your items, your factions of the free peoples that would join your side. Um, and so in your, normally you'd have on the order of four good cards in your hand and on the order of like four evil cards in your hand. And when it was your opponent's turn, you got to blow through your evil cards and draw back up. And then you'd probably draw into like, now you've got six good cards on your turn, and you blow through your good cards, and maybe you can play four or five of them, and then you've got evil cards. And
Hmm.
so you were kind of playing simultaneously two four-card hands in this weird way where you were trying to optimize your play around that. Um, it was not a very good game. I liked it a lot because I got to like, oh, I can be Frodo and Bilbo, and we can just bum around Bag End and hang out with the hobbits, and I never have to have any danger.
Right,
Uh,
right. I don't
which
want to
you know
race through
felt
these movies. I just want to hang out in these
no, that
movies.
this was the old
Oh,
one.
okay.
So then the new one, the Decipher again new for a given value of new. This is before the Fantasy Flight LCG, but the Decipher Lord of the Rings game had a really interesting resource mechanic where as the whoever's turn it was playing again, you had that same mechanic where half of your cards are good and half of your cards are evil, but when you are playing taking your hero turn, you have effectively infinite resources. But everything that you do gives more resources to your evil player opponent to use against you. So you
On the
had to
next
kind
turn.
of on their when they were on your turn when you were doing things, right? So
Okay.
if you play a whole bunch of stuff, then you're this like giant dwarven army marching or whatever, marching through the movies, and then your opponent gets to dump out a whole bunch of Nazgul and stuff at you, assuming that they built their deck in the right way to take advantage of that. And well, okay, you know every resource that you are acquiring as a good on your hero side is a resource that is going to be used against you on the shadow side. So
Okay.
you
We're
have
starting to
yeah,
digress, but I actually that
totally.
it does sound like a really fun like push your luck
It's
mechanic.
very
But
interesting. Yeah,
yeah.
no, it had interesting things to it, but it was also a decipher card game. So
So
we're gonna just move forward.
move on and
Yeah,
not acknowledge as little as possible.
yeah,
Okay. So, but again, it sounds like our list of hand refill games
yeah.
consists of co-op and bad.
I think that's reasonably fair. I
Okay.
mean, not. I'm sure there are exceptions. I'm sure somebody's going to throw something in my face and be like, this was a great game."
I
I
mean,
know there's a lot of
I
people.
think we should.
Yeah,
I mean, we should
yeah,
disclaim. I think we can rule out any card game from our knowledge base, almost any card game, that is not that is not printed in English first, right? I think
yes.
there is an entire ecosystem of Japanese across
East
the
Asian
Pacific card
TCGs.
games that
Yeah,
are
yeah,
just completely foreign to us, completely alien
yeah.
to us. We're not able to speak to. So, yeah, I'm sure there's something out there that's crazy and awesome that we haven't heard of. But
I have vague memories that the Vampire the Masquerade card game that was at one point known as Jihad and now has a name that is not that
yes,
had a hand refill mechanic.
okay, yeah, yeah,
I
yeah, yeah. You're right.
believe.
I played a
Yeah.
respectable amount of that in college.
Okay.
Yeah, so I feel like the hand refill games, similar to Marvel Champions, they're
Yeah.
always then constrained in weird resource ways, right? Like
Yes.
because you have to constrain a card game in some
Something.
way.
Yeah.
So, okay, so that's the weird one. Let's talk about the
Yeah.
obvious one, the one card per turn. That's Magic, that's
Yeah.
Hearthstone, that's Runeterra, that's
Basically everything. Yeah.
basically
Yeah.
everything. So,
It is the assumption unless you are doing something else for a
right,
reason.
right, right. Yep. Okay,
So
so every turn you draw one card.
yes, great, very intuitive, right? Like if you draw a card every turn, you get one new option. And you know, as an amateur game designer, things that are intuitive make your life so much easier. Like there might be better options, but if it is hard to explain and you don't have a way for people to remember it, it doesn't matter because nobody's going to do it, or they're not going to do that. So having that makes a lot of sense, and you know it's also quick, right? Like if you think about the flow of information, right? Every turn you have one new option added to the set of options that you had. And especially when you're dealing with something like Magic, where half, you know, on the order of half of the cards that you draw, caveat, caveat, are lands and therefore don't do anything, caveat, 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 um, you frequently just are not having to think about new options. You can focus more of your attention on the board, and your like the change turnover turn to the game state is relatively small. And
Right,
so
compared to
planning ahead,
Marvel Champions,
yeah,
where you draw six cards and somebody's got analysis paralysis, and it's like, okay,
yeah,
well now I have to wait for 4 minutes for you to parse six
exactly, yeah,
cards, plan your turn. Oh wait,
yeah,
no, that's not going to work. Now we got to communicate as a group. Oh, okay, let me rethink how I'm going to do my turn. And
hmm
so yeah, no,
yeah,
one card that feels very intuitive.
yeah,
I'm, it's quick. I I like it more, and maybe I am not going to talk about Magic lands. I
Sure.
think it's better in games something like Netrunner, Arkham Horror, where every card actually does something, right? So it is still
Yeah.
new information. It is still options. Uh, you're always getting something as opposed to a card that does nothing. Um,
Yes.
and but you're right that especially in a game with lands, that
Yeah.
low information density it can even be lower. But it's even if you
Yeah.
have complex cards, even in something where every card has real text on it,
Six
one
lines of
card is easy to
text.
parse.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's
Okay.
just one new card, which I think is useful. And then in terms of information tracking, you know, the number of cards that are going into your hand and the number of cards that are coming out of your hand are very well known, and so I don't have to keep track of a lot of information about the contents of your hand, and I could just remember, oh, you have that card that I saw for whatever reason because I looked at your hand because I did a discard spell because it's like you add a specific kind of card to your hand according to some rule. Um, it's very easy to keep track of what's in your hand, and if a lot of the game is trying to play around stuff, trying to like read your opponent and play around what they have, being able to have pretty good information about what's in their hand is really important. I think that a lot of people who play Magic really value the idea of reading what your opponent has. You know, they've tapped their mana in this weird way, so therefore it's very likely that they have this card in their hand that they haven't used, and I just keep track of that. And because the information flow is low, it's easy for me to do.
So this is kind of
Yeah.
a corollary, but one thing Magic does that I feel that I judge every other game against, and
Yeah.
almost universally every other game comes up wanting, is how much action can you take with the cards that you have in play, right?
Yes.
So you can attack, maybe you can do a
Yep.
thing. Magic sets a really high bar, and especially
Oh
modern
God.
Magic, with the
Oh man.
number of like spend
So many
here's this
activated
card,
abilities. Yeah.
but activated abilities, specifically activated abilities with that cost resources. And
Yeah.
so you're drawing new cards. You're even so
Hmm.
that's I think one of the things that tempers Magic. You're
Yes.
drawing one card per turn,
Yeah.
and maybe it's just a land,
Hmm.
but many decks have a rich set of options to
Hmm.
spend all of their resources without spending any cards from hand.
Yes, that is an essence of of a lot of modern Magic design is making sure that your cards on the board do interesting things, like
Right.
that you can spend all your resources in interesting ways, even if you're drawing lands.
Right. And
Right.
I remember when Hearthstone launched, I was pumped,
Yeah.
and there was never any activated abilities on cards. I'm sure there are some, but not enough.
There are some now. Yeah, not a
Right.
lot, but yeah.
And same thing with Eternal. Same
Hmm.
thing with, I mean, basically every digital game in the interest of speed.
Yeah.
But even, and I'm very pro Star Wars Unlimited, but we've got a few, the Red Admiral, whichever,
Yeah.
Ozzel,
Ozzel.
that
Ozzel.
allows you to
Yeah.
activate him to play a card from your hand and so forth.
Mhm.
There are a few that have a thing they can do other than attack, but primarily
Yeah.
like good stuff is on attack. And I'm
Yeah.
pro that, but I think that helps mitigate the bad feels of a draw one.
Yes.
And that's
Yes.
kind of that second order effect where with Magic, you're only drawing one, and maybe
Hmm.
it's even a zero because it's a land in terms of
Yeah.
options, but you have still like things to do.
Yeah.
Whereas it's such a bad feel in SWU in any game where you have a lot of resources, 8, 10,
Hmm.
some arbitrarily large number, and you draw one when you not in SWU because I'm saying when you draw one card, but you draw one card in Runeterra or in Hearthstone, and it's
Yeah.
a 2 cost.
Yeah.
You have 8 resources, it's a 2 cost, and there's no other sink
Yo,
for
you're
that
just,
resources.
okay, well, that's
So
bad. Yeah.
you just drew a garbage early game card. To go back to the last episode, it was good
Right.
in my opening. Now it's Garbo, and I can't pair it with anything, and I don't have anything to do. And so I think
Right.
a lot of modern games that do draw one, but don't have that activated ability sink.
Hmm.
I think that's why the draw one fails, where it doesn't hurt as much in Magic.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
And yeah, I mean, Hearthstone with hero powers has kind of this built-in resource sink, but to your point, like it's the same every game, and they're deliberately designed to be kind of like small effects just to make sure that you're using up your resources.
And still, it's
Um,
two, right? You're
yeah,
on turn
yeah,
9 of Hearthstone. You got
yeah,
9 resources. You draw a
yeah,
2 cost, and you use your hero power, and you're still sitting on 5 resource that you
yeah,
can't do anything with. And
yeah,
uh, that's so. I mean, and
yeah.
I highly doubt Fantasy Flight's listening, but if they are, dear God, I hope we get to see some more activated abilities. I realize the game is meant to be fast paced,
Sure.
but man, I really want to sink resources into cards I've already played and just
Yeah.
accumulate a disgustingly large hand.
I think another thing that I really want to call out is the problem where you have games where some of your cards are resources, and that's either because some of your cards are lands or some of your cards get turned into resources in something like Lorcana. And there, if you're drawing one, but every turn you have to turn, or ideally every turn you're turning one of your cards into a resource, and then you're also probably playing a card, you very rapidly get into top deck wars, where you have no cards in hand or you have one card in hand, and you're just playing off the top of your deck. And that can feel really. It makes the variance of the game a lot more exposed. Where if
Why are
you,
you
yeah,
referencing um, the resource mechanic? Isn't that true in Magic that you have
no, it's
you
the
draw?
same problem, right? Like in Magic, you start off with 7 cards. Every turn you're drawing one, but you're playing two. One of them is a land, and the other of them is a card. So you very rapidly get down to 0 cards in hand, right? Lorcana doesn't. You're not drawing lands. Everything
You're just
works
drawing.
as a
Some of your
card,
cards are inkable, but yeah.
right?
So you quickly are
Yeah, and
playing
so
more
if
than you're
you're
drawing.
right, but if you're inking a card every turn, then you're taking one in and you're putting two out. You're playing one card to the board and you're inking another card, so very rapidly you get into top deck wars. And the games do a lot to mitigate that, but top deck wars feel really bad because to point about that I was trying to make about variance is it exposes a lot of the core variants of the game. In Magic, if you're top decking and you draw lands and your opponent top decking here refers to I don't have anything in hand, you don't have anything in hand, we're both just drawing a card for the turn and playing it to do something. If I draw a land and you draw a good card, well, that sucks, but it also feels like it's pure luck. And I think that in a lot of games like that, when you don't have a hand that you're managing and you're just sort of playing off the top of your deck, it feels very more luck based than it actually is.
When I was in middle school, I read a book. I'm blanking on the title, but the premise is this sister and brother go run away and they live in the Museum of Natural History and just
Yeah,
hide and they
sure.
sleep there at night and everything. And the younger brother had accumulated a lot of money that allowed them
Mm-hmm.
to survive by playing war for nickels on the bus. And
Yeah,
the game was described and it sounded pretty awesome. And I was like, oh man, I hadn't
yeah,
discovered, this was before I discovered Magic. And I was just like,
sure.
oh man. And so I convinced some friends to play it, and it was just literally like flipping over. Once you play it, it's like, oh,
Yeah,
we're just flipping over the top card of our deck, and yeah,
I'm
I
not
win or
making any
you win.
decisions. Yeah,
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 and I was like, oh, this is terrible. I was so disheartened when I discovered
yeah,
that War was a terrible game because I mean the name, right? It sounds awesome.
yeah,
Fifth grade Parker. Okay, so okay, so top
yeah,
deck wars reason against, and that segues, I think,
yeah.
into 2 card draw. And one of the things I
I
love.
wanted to make one more note,
Yes,
and
please.
that's about dead on board syndrome. So this is if I am in a bad situation and I am drawing 1 card per turn, the number of cards that I can draw that will fix me tends to be very small because any card that I draw that has to fix my situation has to be good on just its own, right? I'm drawing 1 card per turn, so unless this card is going to fix my problem, I am dead.
Right.
And so being dead on board feels bad.
Yeah.
It feels like, yeah,
If you're fishing
okay,
for
I have to
answers,
wait
it's
a
a
whole
slow
turn
fish.
cycle. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So yeah. Okay. So
All right.
I have encountered that often. So I feel that.
Yes.
Okay. So noted that drawing one, fewer options leads you
Yeah.
to just getting stuck. I also feel like
Yeah.
with instant speed counters in Magic and so forth, there's a higher likelihood of, well, I draw one and you say nope, and I draw another one
Yeah.
and you say nope,
Yeah.
and I
No.
draw another one.
Yep.
And then it's
There's a
like not
reason
only are
why.
you losing, you're
Yeah.
losing slowly, and that's even
Yes.
worse, right? So that would be dead on board syndrome. Okay, good,
Yes.
awful. So let's talk about
Yeah.
why we love SWU, why we love Star Wars Unlimited, because two cards
Yes.
per turn. Um,
Yes.
Still pretty intuitive, right? Like I mean, I
Yeah.
can count to one. I may be an English lit major, but I can count to two as well.
Yes.
So that's intuitive, yeah.
Yep.
It's quick, right? Like
Yep.
I'm pro drawing two. I think it solves that resource problem, and I
Yes.
actually think I wanted to note that I think it adds like a really interesting decision space because for the
Yeah.
first couple turns in the game, you're drawing two, but you're not drawing two actions. You're not drawing two
Yes.
things you can add to the board.
Yes.
You're drawing two choices,
Yes.
but very, very rarely, in unusual circumstances, are you
Yeah.
keeping both cards before you hit your resource peak. Whatever every deck has its whether it's five or seven or nine,
Whatever. Yeah.
you know. And one of the things I always enjoy is when you get to that like kind of one card, one resource less than the highest resource of your deck. So you've got an 8 cost Star Destroyer, but you're at 7. If you haven't drawn that 8 cost Star Destroyer, that allows you to just essentially, nope, I'm just going to keep 2 now.
Yes.
They're both playable. Increase my options. Oh, I've drawn that 8 cost Star Destroyer. Now I'll resource. And then you get that pivot to 2 options when it matters more.
Yeah. No, and I think that it, at the risk of stealing content from the future, I think
Please,
that
always, those guys suck.
Yeah, I think that the way that the resourcing system works is very interesting because at the point that you stop resourcing, you now are getting card advantage. Like every turn that you are not resourcing something, you have one extra action that you get to do. And the choice of whether you stop at the point where you can do one action per turn or you stop at the point at which you could do 2 actions per turn, I think is very interesting. Especially if you're playing like a relatively low to the ground deck. If my highest cost card is 4, do I keep resourcing until I get to 8 so that I can always play both of the cards that I draw every turn, or do I stop at like 6
or 4? Yeah. So
yeah, or 4? Yeah.
I think I find that fascinating. Fascinating. I also it makes those cards feel better, right?
Yes.
Knowing that. And I'd love to at some point see some math or try to figure out the extent to which is a 5 cost and a 3 cost approximately as good for getting card advantage, but approximately as good in a turn as an 8 cost, right? Like playing one 8 cost. If you have 8 resources and you have one 8 cost card, is that always going to be more than a 5 cost and a 3 cost, right? And my instinct is yes, but it feels less bad to sometimes be able to say, okay, I'm going to start pushing in both lanes, or I can slow you down in one lane and play a separate card. The ability to just keep up with 2 cards is great. It also means that when you're drawing like an 8 and a 2, you can just sit on the 2 until you need to round out a 6.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it makes those like cards that are good in your opening feel less bad. And I think that's kind of why you and I in last episode maybe didn't quite see eye to eye on Inferno 4, where for me, a 2 cost filter is a great round out a 6 cost, right? Like, that's a fantastic cap to Dooku. I'm going to Dooku and tutor.
Right, because I've got 9 resources to spend, so might as well. And, I think that it really comes down to in the way that your deck is built. Like, is it frequently the case that you're ending up with odd costs to your resources? Or are you able to like sculpt your hand and your turn such that you're always getting sort of maximum spending on every turn? And I think that that's an interesting question. And I think that I overestimate my ability to always get maximum resource value on every turn.
So in our first Force Unlimited game, not our first game of Star Wars Unlimited, but our first game that we played before our very first recorded episode, we talked about in episode 1 that you had been kind of constantly twice, I think, peeking at my hand. Yeah. And yet, with the 2 cards and the resource, that was very quickly moved information. How much of that is the draw 2, do you think? And how much of that is the ability to essentially play cards face down to muddy the waters?
It's both. It's both, right? Like, drawing 2 means that there are 2 new game objects that I'm needing to keep track of. So if you imagine a game of Magic versus a game of SWU, 2 turns from now, my game of Magic, I have drawn 2 cards, and I have maybe played one of them um, that I didn't get to see. In SWU, I have drawn 4 cards, and I have maybe played 3 cards, and 2 of which I don't know what they are.
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
And
and
so,
earlier tonight,
yeah,
you ran Kanan for 6 into my Luke Skywalker
yeah,
leader and leaving him with 1 hit point. And
yeah.
I played Luke's lightsaber, healing him to full, which was, I think, the turn. I think that was probably, if we
That was
were
the
commenting,
backbreaker. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
that was the turning point. Um, and I was like, you knew that, you had seen that card,
I had just assumed you would have
Sparkler,
resourced it, right?
right?
Because
But
yeah,
no, man,
you
that
didn't.
I was like ready to.
Yeah,
And that's that trap, right? I was like, man, at
yeah,
some point, I gotta let Luke take damage, but also,
yeah,
and so, even though you had seen the card, it had
yeah.
still, that water was so muddy,
Yes.
it was useless.
No,
So
absolutely. And
okay,
I think that that's really very an interesting situation. That's something that Draw 2 does really well. Um, you want information tracking, but I think that it is helpful to muddy the waters a fair bit so that you're not necessarily constantly
playing
aware
chess,
of exactly what. Yeah, yeah. You're not playing chess. If I wanted to
okay,
play chess, I would play chess. Yeah,
right, yeah, good
yeah,
game. Lasted, been
yeah.
around for a while.
Fine
Probably
game.
not.
Yeah,
It'll probably still be here whenever Star Wars Unlimited is not. Um,
yeah,
I also feel like with Draw 2, the even though, okay, so logically,
yeah,
one card randomly coming off the top of my deck could be the absolute thing that I need. Could be Garbo,
yeah,
and so that feels like random chance I'm saved or a random chance I got screwed. And
yeah.
we're doubling up because it's my random draw and your random draw. With
Yes.
Draw 2, logically that's still true. I could draw 2 Garbo, you could draw 2
Right,
backbreakers.
but the variance is reduced, right? Like the more cards that you are drawing, the higher the cards that are in your hand are going to be a mirror to your deck construction. If imagine that we had 100 card decks and we shuffled our 100 card decks and we decided who won the game by flipping over the top card of the deck. You know, if
Right.
you're if there you don't feel like your deck construction plays a huge amount in there. Whereas, if you're drawing 99 of the 100 cards and you're comparing it to the other 99, whoever has the best 99 is probably going to win.
Right. Yeah, I feel
Yeah.
like 1 feels like flipping a coin, 2 feels like
Yeah.
fishing.
Yes.
And that's a nuanced feel thing, but it's true.
Yeah.
Okay. So 2 is
Um,
good, but
yes.
why I know you now. There's got to be
I
reasons
have
why
some
you don't.
downsides.
Yeah.
I have 2 hands, unfortunately, and so I am unable to say that things are good without noting the things that are bad about them.
So on the other hand,
Yes. Combo danger is a really big thing. So I have not seen any cards right now in SWU that have made my combo alert light go off, where it is 2 cards that you play, both of them, and you immediately win the game, right? Like that's sort of your classic A plus B combo, of which there have been many, many in Magic. But when you're drawing 2, you can go from being completely unable to combo to immediately being able to combo without there being a point in between where you are partially able to combo.
drawing your
And so,
channeling and
right,
your fireball at the same time.
right, exactly. And if there is not an intermediate space where your opponent can stop you from doing the channel and then the fireball, that feels bad. So, discard effects are traditionally very good against combo related strategies, but if you're drawing 2, you can't, and there's an A plus B combo, you can't necessarily stop it.
Okay. Okay.
So that, that
So
yeah,
you're saying that's separate things, that combo is higher
yeah,
danger, discard is a
yeah,
less powerful answer to problems.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, discard is also just a less powerful answer to problems, and draw is less good. If you're
Yeah,
drawing
draw
2
does
cards
not.
a turn.
I mean, I'm trained for
Yeah,
25 years of playing, almost 30
exactly.
years of playing CCGs. Get draw
Yeah,
is good. More options, more
yeah.
good. But it just doesn't feel quite
It doesn't feel as good. Yeah, and there's a reason for
search your
that. You're drawing 2
feelings.
cards a turn. Yeah,
Like search your feelings, like tutoring for 1 card.
no.
I mean, even that feels, maybe it's just overpriced, but a lot of
I
the
think it is. Yeah, it's separate discussion, but I don't think that there is a card that I would search my feelings for almost ever. The number
okay,
of circumstances in which I would be happy to draw search my feelings is very low in the current card pool.
Okay. Okay.
But also just like battle plans where you're drawing two.
Yeah.
I mean,
I was going to
it's
do that at the
fine,
end of my
but
turn anyway.
yeah, and it costs 3 in aggression, and I can see an argument for it. You know, like back when I was first starting to build SWU decks, I felt like I had to have aggression in my control deck so that I had card draw, but that seems less meaningful. And other things, you know, again, this is something that with time I think we're going to get better at doing the evaluation for. But I have a bunch of, you know, I look at the V wing, and I see, oh, it's an Elvish Visionary. It's an Elvish Visionary that flies even. Great.
Yeah.
Of course I'm going to include this. But it's not. It's much less good than that.
Yeah, yeah. That card,
Yeah.
2 to draw 1, and you're just left with a 1/1 in space is...
It's not bad, but it's not exciting, right?
Yeah.
So that's yeah.
I set my hopes higher than not bad. So
yeah.
okay.
And I think that with time we're going to get better at evaluating these things.
We as the community, or we as you and me?
I think both. Ideally both. I mean, I might not get it any better ever.
The community's just going to get awesome,
yeah.
and we're just going to keep turning out content based on being terrible. So
by God, you know, another example of this, like Force Throw, right? Force Throw, it's 1 cost. Your opponent discards a card of their choice. That doesn't feel real good, but it's also 1 cost.
No.
Is it?
No. You're missing half the fun, Ned.
No,
somebody
if you have a Force
discards.
user, yeah.
No. Somebody discards.
Yes,
so you can discard. You can throw a Star Destroyer at someone. That's the You know, it's good early. It's good late. Yeah. So.
Yeah. No.
But it's still them. The discard isn't the point, right? Like
you're 2 for 1ing yourself. Yeah.
The discard. The appeal of the discard is not the card. It's the choice that they have to make, right? Like especially early game when you would be hitting them as opposed to yourself. That ping is, if they're discarding a 2, that's a 2 they could play. If they're discarding an 8 that they can't play, you're crushing them. So, you know, that's 8 damage. That's going to take anything out.
Assuming you're the Force user, yada. Well,
yeah.
Well,
but without the Force user, it's just terrible. Like, why would you just discard 1 is? Who cares? They're going to draw
attractive.
2. Yeah.
I spent a resource to not do very much. And that kind of leads into, I have these labeled in my notes as like Jund and control questions. So Jund is a tradition. Jund is a traditional. Yeah, it's a traditional Magic term. It specifically means a 3-color combination of red, black, green. But it refers more typically to a style of deck where people have T-shirts that say like "When in doubt, Jund 'em out," for instance.
Okay.
And this is a very popular style of deck where basically, when you are playing Jund, you are playing kill spells and discard spells and reasonably statted mid-range threats. And the entire theory of this kind of deck that a lot of people like and has been very popular is I'm going to turn this into a low resource game where I'm going to trade my kill spells for your stuff. I'm going to trade my cards in hand for your cards in hand with discard. And so now I have like 1 card that's a good size mid-range threat, and you have 1 card that is not a good size mid-range threat, so I get to win. Right?
I mean,
that's
doesn't
a very
quite
popular...
speak to me, but I'm not offended. I see the appeal.
Right.
Yeah.
So these kinds of like resource denial strategies where you're trying to turn it into a low resource game.
And when you say resource, you mean all resources, not like capital R resources.
Not capital R resources. Yes.
Right.
I'm not trying to deny your capital R resources that you use to pay for units, although that is a side effect, right, of discard effects, is that
a low tool game. Low tool game.
Low tool
You have fewer
game,
tools.
right?
So okay.
If we both have few tools, but I have like my couple of tools that I get to deploy are better, that's a style of deck that a lot of people like, and that would draw 2. I'm not sure about the viability of that style of deck.
Okay.
And you know, you might say, I don't care about Jund. Jund, you are old, Ned. Nobody has played Jund in nigh unto 5 years, and you'd be right. But also, I think that people do like playing control, and one of the classic control things to do is you try and run your opponent out of steam, where you're going to have a bunch of cards in hand, and they're not going to have a bunch of cards in hand. And if you're both drawing 2, are you going to be able to do that as effectively? I don't know. I think that you did it very effectively in the last game that we played, and I think that there are going to be control decks it will exist in some form, but I don't think you're ever going you the odds that you are going to end up in situations where you have like 7 cards in your grip and your opponent has the 2 that they've just drawn are going to be less common than in other circumstances, just because since we're both drawing 2, maybe you're not going to run out of steam as fast. And I don't know. This is somewhat untrod ground. Um, but yeah,
Okay.
I think that is something, you know, a lot of archetypes might not translate over, and whether that's good or bad depends on how you feel about those archetypes. But a lot of those archetypes are nice. I like them.
I think two kind of offhand comments,
Yeah,
they'll live rent free in my brain. Josh, the Massey, the OP person
yeah,
for Star Wars Unlimited, made a comment that a one set meta isn't thrilling, and that's why they're
agree.
not doing a Worlds in 2024. Is because nobody wants
Sure.
to go to Worlds in a one set meta, and so that tells me there's depth and dynamism forthcoming. I mean, that
Mm-hmm.
seems true, period, but that seems part of the plan, right? Uh,
Yes.
I gather through Twitter osmosis that set two of Lorcana did not shake up the known truths of set one,
Yeah.
and set three is getting lands or whatever, so that's great. But
Yeah.
I'm hopeful set two. Not that I'm
Yeah.
we haven't even seen all of set one, but that we'll get some
Set to a
depth
swoon.
combined
Yeah.
with. I believe it was Tyler Parrott who made a comment that they're keeping shields pretty limited. Shields right now absorb damage, but that
Mm-hmm.
shields will exist in future sets. My personal supposition is set three, but he made a comment that they will exist as a resource. Shields are a
Yeah.
resource with which to fuel effects, and those two kind of things tell me, okay, we are going to get into this kind of greater dynamism where it's less about locking down those options from a
Yeah.
control because like you said, there will be more archetypes. I
Yeah.
am willing to wager their entire archetypes we haven't seen yet in future
Yes.
sets.
110%.
So okay, so we generally don't like hand refill in a modern competitive
Yep.
card game. Uh, draw one is fine,
Yep.
but we could do better.
Yep.
Arguably, Star Wars Unlimited and Final Fantasy have done
Yep.
better with Draw 2. I'm
Yep.
super big on Pro 2. The last competitive card game that I really
Yep.
got into was Netrunner.
Mm-hmm.
And for the dear listener, if you're not familiar with Netrunner, one of the interesting mechanics in Netrunner is that you had a finite number of actions.
Mm-hmm.
For all intents and purposes, we're going to focus on the runner, and we'll say 4. You had 4 actions. You draw 0 every turn. You get to do anything you want with your 4 actions, and one of those actions was draw a card. Now,
Yes.
if you had a wonderful hand and you had the tools that you needed, you could not draw anything and do 4 cool stuff. And if you
Mm-hmm.
were fishing for more stuff, if you needed more stuff, you could just pass and draw 4. You could just spend your 4
Yeah.
actions drawing 4. And wherever in the middle, you felt you needed to be. I feel like most players, most of the time, would draw 1 and then
Mm-hmm.
do 3 things. But
Stuff. Yeah.
you know, how do
Interesting.
we
Yeah.
rate games where, the, on the one hand, I guess Ned, this is a question that I haven't asked you to prepare for, but how do we rate games where the players have control over how much they draw, and maybe that ties into a future episode because that feel of how much do I want to do versus how much do I want to accumulate
Yeah.
relates to the same Star Wars Unlimited. Do I want to resource one of my cards or do I want to do stuff with
Yeah.
those two
No,
cards?
and I think that it is a really interesting question. Is that I'm kind of two minds about it. Where from a like competitive game design perspective, I think that having control over how much and how fast you're drawing and having it cost resources is really interesting, right? Like to the point of if you need to draw specific cards, you can just go into turbo draw mode. And especially in a game like Netrunner, where there are sometimes specific cards that you need to do things, you need, to talk about the runner, you need your breakers for certain kinds of ice. Sometimes you just need to go into turbo draw mode and you can spend almost all of your resources in the turn drawing, and so you're not in this situation where, geez, I haven't drawn this type of card that I need. You can do something about that. On the other hand, I have also seen that it is really problematic. And what I mean there is that for newer players or players who aren't as serious about the game, deciding when and how to draw cards is really meaningful. And it really rewards you knowing your deck inside and out. Like, is there. It's really tempting when you're in a situation where you're not sure to just hit the top of your deck to find something else.
So
But
you're saying
if,
it's a trap that encourages inaction.
yes,
That I don't really feel great right now. I'm going to try to draw cards into my perfect answer as opposed to
right,
just do stuff, get stuff done.
yeah, but it's also a trap from the other point of view is that for people where they're good at looking at a board state and analyzing exactly how you can use your terrible tools to get through a particular weird situation, um, sometimes the answer was just you need to draw. But because the draw is variance inducing, right? Like you don't know what you're going to get, you can
Right.
end up underdrawing and then running yourself out of resources because you spent all your resources doing stuff that could have been better accomplished by just like draw to your thing that's actually supposed to do the thing.
Okay. Okay.
And so it adds a lot of complexity and it's really good and interesting, but I think it's also dangerous. And you need systems that are good, and you also have to understand that it is going to make some of your player base have bad feels, and that is a choice that you have to make as a designer sometimes. If you
I
give
have
people
two more
more freedom,
questions.
some people will abuse it.
First question.
Yeah. Yes.
So draw two. Also, I feel like the game is faster because of it, right? Like,
Yes.
I mean, not it's just because everybody's getting more options. You're able to vomit forth. If you're
Yep.
control, you're able to see the cards you need more often. If you're aggro, you're drawing
You
two
just
every
get
turn. You
more
just
stuff.
got more
Yeah.
vomit, right? So the game is faster, which and you and I had talked at length about Marvel Snap being capped at 6 and the
Yes.
implications of that game being fast. How do you,
Yeah.
just subjectively? I mean, use
Yeah.
math if you want to, but subjectively, how do you feel about the game being faster because of it?
So from a like huge Ned subjective perspective, fast games are fun, but fast games also are like fast food in that you tend to eat too much of it. So I found when I was testing a deck that I didn't end up bringing to the match tonight, I was doing a lot of testing on Force Table, and because the games were relatively fast, I would just sort of churn through a whole bunch of them, and I needed to step back and say, is this actually working, or am I just like churning through games until I it feels like I've got the deck right? And
Right.
stepping back and taking the evaluation, I needed to stop playing because the deck was not working, and so just like stop with that. And fast games, to the point of Marvel Snap, I think that there is a tendency to kind of try and fit them in weird places, so you're not valuing the game as much. Whereas when you have games that are a little bit slower and a little bit more methodical, you play them less frequently, but at the same time, I feel like you can get more emotional oomph out of them as part because you are playing them less frequently, and so you are thinking more about your individual choices. I don't know.
No, that's fair.
Does that
I
does that
think
answer
I
your
am.
question?
Yes, it does. I just wanted a feeling. I think I am having to untrain my board game mind, in that
Yes.
I have been trained by years in the board game hobby that the gold standard is Twilight Imperium, Cole Worley, Here I
Yep.
Stand, Wars of the Reformation. If a game doesn't take 8 hours, what's the point, right?
Yeah.
Like why are we even here? Is it
Yeah.
really a good game if it takes
We're
2 hours or
we're
less?
just farting around with Sushi Go.
Yeah, right. Like who
Yeah.
cares?
Yeah.
And intellectually, I recognize that's false.
Mm-hmm.
Emotionally, though, that resonates, right? Like,
Yeah.
and that's kind of how I feel about Star Wars Unlimited is that draw two is more
Hmm.
fun, it's
Yeah.
better, and yet all of my training tells me, oh, like it's making the game too fast. I
Yeah.
want the game to be
Yeah.
richer and longer. I mean,
More complex,
more
have
complex, but
deeper decision to trees. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
yet, I mean, we're seeing. I think that the decision tree is deep enough. Like at the end of
Yes.
almost every game, I'm looking back at decisions I made,
Yeah.
agonized over where did I go wrong, where did you
Yes.
go wrong, where did I
Hmm.
get lucky is the big one for me. Like where did it work out, but it was still a bad decision. So
Hmm.
clearly the decision tree is complex enough, but there's this this kind of trained reaction of wow, two cards is really fast. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
this must be a game for casuals. So I am personally working on overcoming that.
Yeah.
My second question, we
Hmm.
talked a lot about you mentioned the word variance a half
Yes.
dozen times while we are talking about this, which feels like one of those mathy words. So, Ned, what is your real name?
My name is Monday.
My name is Monday. I'm a mathematician.
So Parker, how much do you like fishing?
Uh, I read the River Y, the Brothers K, River Y, Brothers K, not the Brothers Karamazov.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was the River Y. It was a book when I
Yeah.
was young. I had to read this book in high school about this kid whose dad is a fly fisher and mom is a bait fisherman, and like
Hmm.
he goes and lives in the woods and does a ton of fishing, and uh, while he comes to terms with the relationship with his parents, and he adopts this pet fish, and while cleaning like a predator fish, the pet
Yeah.
fish dies because it beats itself to death in the glass of the window. And later that day, my parents took me fishing for the first time on a charter boat, and I was the only one in my family who caught fish, and so then I had to like watch them flop around in the boat, which in theory I'm okay with, but after just reading about like this treasured fish flopping around and dying, and I have had like I have no problem with people going out and killing animals for food, but
Sure.
watching that happen, that was the one time, never again. So generally opposed to fishing, but I assume that's not what you're talking about. The personal anecdote, maybe TMI. I assume you actually
Well,
wanted
no,
to hear
no,
about
no.
cards.
I think it's
so.
a beautiful. I think it's a beautiful personal anecdote. But to your note, we're not talking about fishing for fish. We're talking about fishing for cards. So there's
Hate
a
it.
class of cards.
Good stuff. Deck. Every card that I draw off the top of my deck should be the one I want next.
No, no. Okay. So there is a class of cards that I'm going to call fishing cards. This might not be official terminology, but I'm going to use it because I think it's useful.
It's official
And
for
that
us.
is-
Force Unlimited official.
Yes. You look at the top so many cards of your deck, and you catch cards, some number of cards that depend on some characteristic. So recruitment is an example of a fishing card, where you look at the top 5, you take a unit. Mon Mothma is a fishing card. You look at the top 5, and you take a rebel. Um, some of
But
these are more complex.
battle
Yeah.
plans, just draw two. That not a fishing
Just draw
card.
2,
because-
not a fishing card.
So
Not a fishing
if
card.
it hits 100% of the things, if every card that you look at is something you want, that's just draw.
That's just draw, exactly.
And we haven't seen this effect in Star Wars Unlimited, but if there's a card that's like look at the top 5 and draw one, is that a fishing
Yes.
card?
That is not.
If all
technically-
5
I
meet
would
the
not call
criteria.
that a fishing card. I would call that a
Okay.
card selection card.
Okay.
The,
okay.
Again, this might be hyper specific, but when you're playing these kinds of fishing cards, and I look here at decks that I have built to include prepare for takeoff, there is a question, and that is, how many fish should I have in my deck? Where again, if we're looking at the top some number of cards of my deck, and I'm catching some number of fish, where the fish match what I'm expecting, then how many fish do I need in order to be able to consistently hit? And here we can pull out your old trusty standard hypergeometric distribution.
Okay. Well, I'm going to pause you right there. So,
Yeah.
when I played competitive card games, I care
Yes.
a little less with like Arkham Horror and Marvel Champions. But when I was playing
Sure.
competitively, I need to know, I want to look how many cards do I need to draw to see the thing I want to see, and again, English Lit major, but I'm familiar with the phrase hypergeometric, where
Yes.
you search Google for hypergeometric calculator, and there's the how many are in your deck for thing, how many Are you drawing to see the thing? Like,
Yeah.
and then you hit calculate and tells you the percentage of chance that you'll see the thing by the time you want to see it. So
Yeah.
that's what we're talking about. I'm gonna need a little bit more from you, Ned, because like that feels like
I mean, okay. So I hear you that there are these hypergeometric calculators, but I really want to point out that I did more than just Google for a hypergeometric calculator. I used the old scipy.stats.
I'm just
To
saying we're
pull out
leaning on My Name is Monday for like half of our brand here so far.
No. There's more, but wait,
Okay.
there's more. We're gonna get to the more, but I have to start off with the simpler case.
Okay,
So that
okay,
is,
okay.
yeah, basically you're pulling up the old hypergeometric calculator, except that I'm doing it in Python and doing it faster and more efficiently, because we're not doing
No shade to
brute
GeoCities.
JavaScript like monsters. But fundamentally, your chance of getting hits is dependent on the number of hits, the number of cards that you're looking at, and the size of your deck, and the number of hits that you can take. So there is a formula that may or may not pop up here for the hypergeometric distribution. This is the probability distribution. So you want to look at the CDF of this. This is the cumulative distribution function. So basically you're integrating this thing up through some value, and we're going to use that to calculate what the odds are of getting maximum value. Where maximum
We love
value
maximum
is
value.
Everybody loves maximum value. Where for like Mon Mothma and Recruit, it's are you getting the unit that you wanted? If you get more than one unit, or if you get more than one thing that meets your characteristics, then that's fine. But
So
you wanna
one
make sure you get
Imperial
at
with
least one.
Tarkin is not maximum value.
Correct.
Okay.
One vehicle with takeoff, prepare for takeoff, not maximum value.
Right.
You're trying to see what is the chances of getting maximum value based on some reasonable assumptions. And there is one other thing that I have to do that is more complex than just plugging things into the cumulative distribution function, and that is the choice that you make about the number of hits that you include is made at deck building time, right? But
When else
you
would it
are
be made?
playing, I mean, imagine that there was some way to insert more hits into your deck at some point in the future, or you could like control how deep you're digging.
Oh,
I
like
don't know.
pick a trait, search your top
Yeah.
5 for that trait.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. But let's go back to this idea. You control the number of hits that are in your deck at deck building time, but by the time that you play the card, some of those hits will no longer be in your deck because you will have drawn them.
Oh, okay,
or
so
you
this
will
is
have played
different
them.
than the GeoCities hypergeometric calculator, and that's
Yes.
just saying how many cards do I have to draw to see this thing that I want to see. You're saying,
Yes.
but I
If
may
I
not
am-
want. It's not when do I see the thing. It's later. I'm triggering the hypergeometric
Exactly.
calculator 6
Yes.
rounds into the game, so the
Yes.
terrain is shifted. Okay, I'm following.
The terrain has slightly shifted, right? And so I have done a series of calculations for a set of common cards, and you can see the chart here. Just to describe it, it's basically going through and it's giving these pretty curves for a variety of different cards. Mon Mothma and Recruit are the same line, even though they have different costs, because I'm considering every card to be played on the earliest turn that can be played.
Okay.
There is one card, though, that is my nemesis, and that is Vader. Because
Unit
Vader, the unit Vader does not work with a simple hypergeometric.
But luckily,
And
you
why?
know more than hypergeometric.
Luckily, I know more, but just to explain exactly why, because that's the point of Monday, and you can skip over this. I'm sure that Parker can provide a timestamp here. But
Nobody should be skipping. This is like people should be skipping 2. I need to all learn for this episode the chapter marks. People should be
Yeah.
skipping 2. This is what we're offering. Like, oh, why do people like drawing 2? It feels fun. Like anybody can do that. This is why people are here. So nobody's fast forwarding through this.
So,
Okay.
for Vader, the simple hypergeometric, you need to be able to classify every card in your deck as being either a hit or not a hit. However, with Vader, is a 2 a hit? The answer is maybe. Like, does
If you
a
drew
2
a
give
1.
us max value? If you drew a 1, then it's a hit. If you didn't draw a 1, then it's not. So in the chart, there are 2 lines, and these are the ones that you can calculate with the hypergeometric if you make some really radical assumptions. And so one of them I'm going to call Vader for ones, and that line Vader for ones is saying I'm going to pretend that my deck consists of nothing but some number of ones, that is units that cost 1 resource, some number of Darth Vader, and some number of other cards that do not cost between 2 and 3 or are not units. So basically you have ones, you have other stuff, and then you have Vader. So when you play Vader, you are looking to see exactly 3 or more hits because the
One
hits
cost-
are always
because-
ones.
Got it.
Right.
Okay.
And then the Vader for 3s is we're doing the same set of assumptions, except instead of looking for 1s, you're looking for 3s, and your deck consists
Your
of
deck
Vader,
is 3 units, 4 pluses, and non-units.
Vader. Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And there you see a slightly different curve, but neither of these two actually quantifies the power of the Dark Lord of the Sith. And so for that, I have to make a series of... Yeah.
The Dark Lord of the Sith is the leader, Ned. Commanding the something Legion. 97th? I don't know. 99th? I should know that. But the subtitle is the Commanding the something Legion. That's the one we're talking about.
Oh, thank you. Yes. Commanding the Nth Legion. Yes.
Nth Legion, right. Yeah. Ooh, I like that. Nth Legion. That's what's the math section. So, okay. So his true power is that you could get a 3. The next game you get a 1, 3 1s. The next game you get a 1 and a 2.
Exactly. The problem is that if you do that, you can no longer stay in hypergeometric lands. You have to go into Monte Carlo.
Which
so
sounds
Monte
more
Carlo,
fun.
Monte
First
Carlo
one
is
sounds
a lot
nerdy.
more
The
fun.
second one sounds like gambling.
So I have made my bones writing Monte Carlo simulations, and the idea behind a Monte Carlo simulation is when a probability is too difficult to calculate, you just simulate it. And because we have computers now, you can simulate that. So
basically, you just have you have multiple probabilities to get all weird, and you just run it some number of times, and then you just tally up how many successes or failures or outcomes that you care about, and then you're like, well, with a million times I ran it or 1,000 times I ran it, I got 170 of this. That's 17% or whatever. That's what you mean.
That's a Monte Carlo simulation. Yeah.
Okay.
Monte Carlo simulations are a very useful tool, and I recommend that people learn how to write simple Monte Carlo simulations. Python has a variety of good packages for doing Monte Carlo, but that's neither here nor there. I did it the kind of old-fashioned way, and then we have to make an additional simplifying assumption, and that problem is how many 1s, 2s, and 3s are in my deck. Now, this is a 3-parameter search space, right? Where I could independently increase the number of 1s, I could increase the number of 2s, or I could increase the number of 3s in my deck, right?
So you can run the Monte Carlo simulation essentially for every possible viable Vader deck.
I could. I don't want to. That's too. That's
you
too
have
much.
other things to do with your computer.
Yes.
Okay.
Watching Empire Strikes Back this weekend with my child. One of those things. So
nice.
Yeah.
So well, enjoy it. I don't know if it's undisputably the best, but it is undisputably not in the worst, right?
Yes.
Right.
No.
Universally liked, if not loved. I mean, I love it. Right.
Yeah, I love it, but neither here nor there. However, if I do, in addition to it being annoying personally for me to do all these permutations, it is also annoying to display graphically because essentially you are having 3 independent parameters and you can do some tricks to make it work, but it just is going to look like crap. And I do not want to do that. So I made a simplifying assumption, and that simplifying assumption is that if I am playing Vader, Commander of the Nth Legion, I will have some number of 1s, some number of 2s, and some number of 3s, where I'm calling that my total number of low-cost units, and they are split equally between 1s, 2s, and 3s. But if I have a odd number, that is a number that is not divisible by 3, I will add an additional 2, and then if I still have a number left over, I will add an additional 3. So for example, if I have 5 low-cost units, I will have 1 1, 2 2s, and 3 3s.
Okay.
And that seems like a reasonable set of assumptions to me.
Okay.
That
feels
reasonable.
reasonable. I'm picturing a scenario where you are. I mean, it's a rounding error of off by 1, but I'm picturing a scenario where you have 17 low-cost units ranged 1 to 3, and you are weighting those in favor of that's 5 1s, 6 2s, and 6 3s.
Yeah.
Which feels that I don't have a problem with that. That raises a yellow flag for me of curves. But let's assume that. But it's close enough. It's good enough for
Right. Yeah.
Again, we're not going to
realistically
calculate.
You'd probably have fewer 1s and more 2s, and
email us your Vader deck, and we can run it for that specific.
I will. I have the code
First 5.
Is flexible.
First
I'll
5.
put it up on GitHub. Yeah. But yes.
Right. Yeah, run it yourself. Learn
Yeah.
Python. It's good for everybody.
Yeah.
So, okay.
So, given these, we can run this, and you see the curve that says realistic Vader. And unsurprisingly, the realistic Vader curve falls between the Vader for 1s and the Vader for 3s.
Because if you're stocking your deck with lots of 1s, you're more likely to get max value. You've also filled your deck with 1s, which is...
Well, yeah, but also like if you have 2s, if you have some number of 2s, if you draw a 2 and a 1, you're great. If you draw 2 1s, no good. If you draw a 2 or some number of 2s and no 1s, also no good. So it's going to be less like your maximum value with Vader is the 3s case, because it's very easy to just have a whole bunch of 3s. And again, this end parameter that we're controlling, number of low-cost units, where I have on the x-axis of the curve, number of hits. Every time that we are adding a hit under realistic Vader chance, first it's a 1, then it's a 2, then it's a 3. So essentially you have fewer 3s and more 2s and 1s, which don't line up quite as cleanly as the 3s do under the set of suit.
But that actually, I think, maps to the realistic use of Vader, in that
Yes.
you're almost certainly going to get value, but
Yes.
there's lots of times when you're not going to get max value, and you probably don't want to maximize your deck for max Vader, max value, because then you're shorting yourself on... I mean, that's great. Congratulations. You get the dream Vader turn. Your deck sucks.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So
So now that we have presented these graphs, but let's say that you do not like looking at these graphs and you don't
or you
want
can't,
to...
right? You're in your car.
Or you can. Yeah, you're in the car.
So,
but I have
if I'm
simple...
fishing, how many
Yes.
fish have to be in the ocean for me to successfully
All right.
fish Ned?
So, assuming that you want a greater than 95% chance of getting max value, you need the following things. For recruiting on turn 1, you need at least 22 units. Similarly, you need at least 22 rebels for Mon Mothma on turn 1. You need 23 vehicles for takeoff on turn 1. You need 21 low-cost units for Green Vader on turn 6. You need 33 Imperial units for Tarkin on turn 3. I think that most of these are pretty reasonable. 23, well, let's just caveat that. 23 vehicles is a hell of a lot, right?
I mean,
and there's not
right-
a lot of low-cost units. Yeah.
And there's a lot of Garbo vehicles, right? Like, we are
Yeah.
nowhere near being able to put 23 good vehicles in your deck.
Yes. So takeoff, I think, should be hold off on that until we see some more good vehicles show up, or play it expect not to get max value from it. 22 units for recruit is trivial. Your deck is going to have 22 units in it unless you built a very, very odd deck indeed. 22 rebels for Mon Mothma is
Good and Leia.
reasonable. Yeah,
I mean, she's.
Yeah.
I mean, that's synergized. It's good in a rebel deck. It's a little harder to get
Yeah.
max value in a non-rebel deck.
Right. I would, if I was not drawing a card with Mon Mothma, I would not play Mon Mothma. To be frank. So I feel like if you're including Mon Mothma, you need 22 rebels.
Ah, well, yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
The last one, the 33 Imperial units for Tarkin, that is a lot. But the decks that I have seen Tarkin in, this is again unit Tarkin, not leader Tarkin. The decks that I have seen Tarkin in typically are running like 40 Imperials or on that order.
So they're really going into it, but
Yeah.
so that raises
Yeah.
two questions for me.
Yes.
First, some homework, Ned.
Yes.
At some point in the future, maybe a mini Monday, a follow-up. I'd love to. This is the kind of thing where Ned's going to message me shortly after we hit stop recording.
Why
being
did
like,
you do this, Parker?
Dude.
Man, I have to write more code.
Or why didn't you mention this yesterday? I'd love to see this with like 30 cards decks, because I think
for limited, yeah.
for limited, and we don't need to explain it again, but I'd love to know, okay, if I've got a 30 card deck, how many rebels do I need to include? Some rules of thumb, because a lot of these cards, like, am I going to take prepare for takeoff? Probably not. But
No.
if it's the last the last card of command of my colors in a draft pick,
Am I gonna run it?
like in a
let me
30
tell you,
card deck,
that
is
is
10
easy.
vehicles good for prepare to take off? Like
Super
the math
easy
changes.
to do, trivial. Yeah,
Right.
nope. Super easy to do. Math is very generic on this. So
So we'll do
I
a mini
expect those
Monday
results shortly.
epilogue. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
I guess my real question on that one is, what would that look like? Okay, so
Yeah.
and then I guess a follow up question is, do you need to get max value? Now some of these it's hit or miss, right? Like you're either
Yeah.
grabbing something with recruiter or you're not. But you
Right.
know, how much? I mean, I feel like Vader with 2 is fine. Like I'm not that
I
sad.
mean, I'm sad because I put Green Vader in my deck.
You don't like Green Vader?
I'm not a huge fan. I mean, I think again, I feel like if I'm including Green Vader, I really want to get max value because I'm paying
Well,
for.
everybody
otherwise
always
just a
wants to
big-
get max value, but
Well, sure, but I like again. This is me as a human being. If I'm paying a lot of resources for effectively a big slab of beef, I want that beef to draw me some cards or something here. Come on.
I mean
You
that's
know,
fair.
and with Vader, you're
I mean, you
it's
want
just
it to,
beef.
but is it? I mean,
Yeah.
obviously you're sad if Vader gets you
Right.
Bupkis, but if you're
You're right.
getting 2, if all you get is a 2-cost villainy unit, I'm not. My heart's not broken.
Sure.
Okay, so and again,
I think that is a reasonable question to ask. I think with Vader it is completely answerable, right? Like you can compare Vader plus a 2 worth of stats, like plus an average 2 worth of stats against a similarly costed 7 cost unit and see like am I getting Vader plus 2 worth of stats? How much value is that compared to a traditional 7 cost unit? And that question is answerable.
okay,
I feel like Takeoff, I don't know that I can answer that question.
right.
Like-
Takeoff and only getting 1 is sad, but
Yeah.
at this point, Takeoff's kind of sad.
Yeah.
Another big point is
Yeah.
I feel like so you did your math on the assumption that these cards are being played the moment they're available. You're
Yes.
playing, but for me, I feel like these cards kind of form a function similar to, especially specifically Tarkin, form a function
Right.
similar to Inferno 4. So if I'm playing Mon Mothma, I'm just great. She's kind of not ideal for 2, but you're grabbing another one. Yay!
Sure.
So she replaces herself, probably.
Right.
And but Tarkin specifically, Tarkin by grabbing 2 feels like I don't know that I want to play Tarkin on 3. I feel like Tarkin is one of those round out a turn 9 where I
Sure.
have a 6. I play Tarkin, and now I'm getting that card advantage later. It's not that I need to get more Imperials on turn 3. It's that you and I are each drawing 2 a turn. We're essentially in top deck mode, and I'm getting to
Right.
grab 1 more. And so I assume the math doesn't, in terms of how
Actually,
you
the
build
math
your deck.
it does get a little bit better. So this is the weird things about hypergeometrics is that if you wait, your deck size is smaller. Now I'm going to caveat this here that I'm pretending that you're drawing like an average set part of your deck, right? Like you're not drawing, but in your particular circumstance, have I drawn more of my hits than expected or not? But assuming that you draw like an average amount of your hits going forward through the turns, when your deck is smaller, the likelihood of you hitting is better. So
That makes no sense to me at all.
No,
like,
no, no, no,
intuitively.
no. Here's a really good idea about it. Let's pretend that I have a 20 card deck, and my 20 card deck, I'm looking for. I have 4 lightning bolts in it, right? Or some card that I want. Right?
Your magic's showing. But
And
yeah. Okay,
my-
so
yeah,
you
sure.
have 4 fish.
I-
There are 4 fish in your 20 card deck.
There are 4 fish in my 20 card deck, and I flip over the top 5 cards of my deck to try and find these 4 fish. And I compare that to a similar situation where I now have a 10 card deck with only 2 fish, but I'm flipping over the same number of cards.
Oh,
Which
right,
would
yeah.
you-
So, or you have a
yeah.
5 card deck with
One.
one fish, but you're flipping over
Right.
80% of your remaining deck. The
Yeah.
odds of the solutions being stacked towards the bottom are
Right.
okay. All right.
Yeah.
So and then you also get to add in the fact that
Right.
you know your hit draw ratio. That wow,
Right.
I've drawn almost every non-imperial card in my deck. It's basically guaranteed, or
Exactly. Versus, I've drawn all my Imperials, so,
odds are bad. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've got some answers. But I think looking at this, it's 21 to 33. But for all our single draws, it's 21 to 23 hits or fish by the time you play your fishing card. And Tarkin, by virtue of needing to draw 2 to get max value.
Right. And Tarkin is also only looking at 5 cards. Compared to, Recruit and Mon Mothma, you're looking at 5 cards, but you only need 1. Takeoff, you're looking for 2, but you need 2, but you're looking for 8.
Oh, okay. You're looking at 8 cards.
Right.
Got it. Okay.
Right.
And that's all she wrote. This was episode number 6 of The Force Unlimited, and we're recording again on January 27th of 2024. Ned and I wished you a happy new year at New Year, but this is us recording in the new year, so we're hoping 2024 is off to a great start for you, dear listener. If you have any thoughts about the episode, please email us at podcast@swoodb.com. Ned, do you have any final thoughts about the episode?
Parker, why didn't you ask me the question about Limited like literally 24 hours ago?
Because you could have run it. Yeah.
So easy to have ready.
Oh man, see, like I'm the wild card, right? Like I'm the chaos monkey. Like I just respond to what I'm given. So, that is my shame. That is me just. Yeah, I shoulda, and I'm sorry.
Yeah,
but
you didn't. Yeah, no, it's fine.
I didn't.
More content for later.
More content for the content mill. With that, dear listener, we will see you in 2 weeks.